And what would it be like if you have the problem of trying to optimize your personal productivity, but you work with other people or you work in a company and somehow their relationships, your relationships with them interferes with how productive you can become. And perhaps you may suspect it has something to do with how you work or don't work with them. This is Francis Wade, and I'm the host of the Task Management and Time Blocking Summit. And welcome. And today I have a very special guest, Dan Markovitz. Dan is an author and a consultant and a brilliant thinker when it comes to all things productivity. Dan, welcome to the summit.
Francis, it is a real pleasure to be with you today.
Great. I'm so glad you accepted my invitation because the truth is, we're going to be exploring a topic or looking at a point of view that you've taken that there is a limit to how productive you can be as an individual who, for example, is implementing GTD or Pomodoro or read my book, for example, and you're attempting to optimize your personal, let's say, task management, because we're in a task management conference. And no matter how hard you work at trying to make sure that tasks don't fall through the cracks, make sure that they fit into your calendar, make sure that you're scheduling each day, you're using your auto scheduler, you're doing all these things to optimize the placement of your tasks and the execution of your tasks in your calendar. And because of some outside environment, you're still not productive. Dan, how comes?
Well, as you know, I wrote an article recently for the Harvard Business Review called "Why Your Productivity Hacks Don't Hack It," and my argument, fundamentally, the thesis, is that you're going for point optimization. The thing is that you're working in a system. Now, if you are independent, you can tune out right now, go get yourself a beer, watch TV, and relax. But if you work Sorry, Francis. I know we want to keep them. We want to keep
I
them.
am, but I have obligations anyway. This is why I'm really curious to see where you're going with this one.
But particularly if you're working in a company, you're dealing with an organization, and so that organizational environment creates overwhelm. That your personal optimization techniques, whatever they happen to be, as you said, whether it's Pomodoro or GTD or you name it, you're going to be steamrolled by the incredible juggernaut-like inertia of the organization. Something you and I talked about earlier is that the way I look at it is that we have, an email is certainly a bugaboo for most people. We have an approach where we're sitting there with fly swatters, swatting every single email or every single mosquito. And no one stops to think, hey, wait a minute, what if I drain the swamp or the stagnant pond and I could get rid of the mosquitoes in the first place? No matter how productive you are, no matter how efficient you are, no matter how task focused you are, if you're swatting at every single little task, at every single mosquito, you're going to lose that battle. It's far better if we look at a system level fix rather
System
than
level.
the individual point fix.
Do you mean that this is like a personality thing? That if I'm like a ENTJ and everybody else is a ISFP, then I won't be able to work with them? Are you thinking of it psychologically? Like, is it something to do with how well I work with teams and how
That's
how, how friendly we are and that kind of thing?
That's a great question. The answer is no. Partly because, frankly, I think I'm an ENTJ or an INTJ, and I can't remember any of the other things. No, I think what I'm talking about is the way the service level agreements we have in an organization and the way information and knowledge flows throughout it. So a very simple example. Let's just say that you've decided that for your ability to get through your task list, legitimate. You say, you know what, I can't look at email all the time. We've all read all the articles and all the scientific research and the book saying you can't answer every email as it comes in because you've got the constant interruptions and the multitasking, counterproductive. Okay, that's fantastic. And you think, that's what I'm going to do. Except that you get an email from your or from the VP or the president or the CEO or whomever who says, I need to see you now. And of course, you're not looking at your email for another 2 hours. And either you get into big trouble and you get yelled at because you missed something truly important for whatever reason the CEO expected you to respond right now, or alternatively, something really bad does happen. And that's the last time you will do that. You've just been taught very harshly that you have to look at every single email. Now, that is a system level decision that the service level agreement, and I should say it's not even a decision, it's just sort of a default mode that we're in, because no one's ever really talked about this. The default mode is you have to respond to emails within minutes. And that is, of course, it's insane, but if that is the default mode, if that's what the leadership team expects, or if that's what your colleagues expect, then that's what you're going to have to follow. And therefore, your notion of looking at email twice a day or 3 times a day, that's not going to work. And
This reminds me of an article I wrote some time back called "How Executives Unwittingly Turn Employees into Morons." My, the idea was pretty much the same, which is that the one VP who has a blow up with the one person who didn't respond to their email within the hour or within the 2 hours, that one person then goes and tells everyone else, listen, you better respond to so-and-so's email on the hour because he blows up on anyone who doesn't respond to his email. And now we have a system-wide culture created by one executive where everyone is left now checking email. But you're going even further, because you're saying that thanks to modern technology, we don't only have to use email, right? That's a blessing, right?
Yeah. So, I have talked often about a quote from Marshall McLuhan, who is a thinker and philosopher, and he talked about the medium is the message. His notion is that the medium that we are communicating in determines to a large extent what the meaning of the message. So it used to be, before we had electronic communication, right? We had letters, and you would receive a letter and you would think, okay, it took a day, 2 days, a week. If it was international, maybe it was 2 weeks or 3 weeks to get a letter, fine. And you wouldn't have to respond immediately because you had 3 weeks. But we knew that if something was urgent, it would be sent via telegram. Telegrams, of course, were expensive. You'd have to go to the Western Union office and you'd have to dictate it to someone and all of that, and you have to pay for it. And you knew if you got a telegram, that was important. You didn't even have to know what was inside the telegram. Just the fact that it came in an envelope from Western Union, you knew it was urgent. So fast forward to where we are today, we've shoveled all of our communication through first into email. And now we've lost the ability to have the medium be the message, because you get everything from there's leftover brownies in the lunchroom to the FBI or the IRS is auditing our books. I need to see you immediately. And because we can't tell whether it's something, well, for some people, maybe having leftover brownies in the break room is something critical that we have to get to right now before they get eaten. But the idea is that we have no ability to distinguish the urgent and important from the non-urgent and important. Then, of course, to your point, we now have Slack, we've got text messaging, Clubhouse, we've got TikTok, we got all these other ways of communicating. And we haven't had a mindful, considered discussion of what channel we're going to use for what type of message. And as a result, it used to be that you were just snowed under via email. Now you have to look at email, you have to look at Slack, you have to check your text messages. Maybe there's some sort of intranet in the company. Maybe there's, who knows what else people
Telegram, WhatsApp, Facebook messaging, DMs and of course, on Twitter, DMs on Instagram.
Exactly.
So on and so forth.
All these things that we could be using, and because we haven't used the medium to define the message, we're now forced into this position where we have to look at everything. And it's utterly overwhelming.
So I'm in a small company of just my wife and I. And I'm going to submit that it's worse, because we have no control over what our clients prefer to use, or even the speakers for the summit, for example. So I have to use multiple ways of contacting speakers, because everyone has their peculiar or their favorite way of communicating. And to get even a generic message or an urgent message or a long informative message, I have to send basically all messages to all channels if I hope for them to land in each person's attention. So I can't even set a policy, because I guess I could try. I'm the host of the summit, therefore you shall only contact me through the tin can with the string in between, two tin cans with the string in between it. But I probably don't. But if I'm in a company, I could have more leverage. But I've never been in a company that has cared enough about its employees' productivity to even explore what you're talking about. Now, why do you think that is? Is this just a level of ignorance that has just risen to become a cultural, or what's your take?
So I think there are several reasons. One is we could call it a level of ignorance. That sounds sort of condescending. Let's call it a lack of awareness, right? People
Right.
haven't thought about it because they were gifted with these fantastic tools. Email, I mean, think about it. It's instant, it's free.
Right.
It's not just text, it's videos, it's pictures, it's whatever you want. It is this freaking miracle. And so we never stop to think, hey, how do we want to use this? So that's one issue. Second, so there's a lack of awareness that there are pros and cons and there are considerations. That's the word I want, really. Considerations with technology, and we should think through it. Again, when we had only telegrams, the consideration was forced in front of us because we had to say, do we want to, I think you had to pay by the letter maybe.
Right.
So
Right.
you actually had to pay cash money to decide, is this worth sending it? Should I use a 7-cent stamp, or do I want to spend $1.35 on a message saying whatever it happens to be? So, and of course you have to get it out of your office and go to the Western Union office and whatnot. So it was forced upon us to consider it. Now it's ubiquitous, it's free, it's easy, it's fun in a way. And so we haven't
And
thought
it's
about
awful.
it.
Killing us.
There's the lack of awareness. I think second, there's a lack of be very, very focused on ourselves. I know what works for me. I know how I work. I know how I want to work. And it doesn't even occur to me to think, what's the impact on the rest of my team? You know, years ago, I was doing a consulting project with a law firm. And this was a mid-sized law firm, you know, maybe 600 lawyers, something like that. And the partner and head of the, I don't remember, it was tax practice, something like this. He used to go home around kind of on the early side, 5:30, 6 o'clock, because he wanted to go home and have dinner with his kids. Great. And then he wanted to be there to, you know, read story to them, put them to bed. Terrific. So everyone else in the office is staying till 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock. He would leave again, 5:30, 6 o'clock, really early. And then he would get back on the computer at 10 o'clock when the kids were asleep. Terrific. And of course, as he's doing his work, he's processing it and he's sending emails to various people at 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock. And this is the way he worked. Okay, fine. He's the senior partner. You got all these first year, second year, third year associates, and you're getting an email from the senior partner in the practice at 1 a.m. What are you going to do? If you're smart, you're going to answer those emails because you want to be seen as responsive. Now, during this project, I convened this tax group and I said, Roger, actually, I can't remember his name was, but Roger, when do you expect people to respond? Because they're responding right now at 1 a.m. He says, oh, God, I don't expect them to respond at 1 a.m. That's insane. I'm writing emails because I left at 5 or 5:30 or 6. I expect them to see this in the morning at 7 or 8 or whenever they come into the office. But of course, they never discuss this. And so he didn't think systemically about what are the consequences of me doing this. And of course, once they had the conversation, it changed everything. People could say, oh, well, now I can ignore you. I can go to bed on my schedule and then I'll take care of the work. So we don't tend to think about what happens when we set meeting policies or we dribble out tasks in little pieces without presenting a coherent whole. We just think about ourselves. We don't look at the system level effects.
Right, right. I think what you're saying is that the technology amplifies benign behaviors and turns them into destructive culture that destroys productivity.
You know, I didn't think of it that way, but yes, that's exactly right. The technology is an amplifier for this.
And when we're unaware, I won't say ignorant, when we're unaware, it happens and it happens and it happens and it happens. And I know someone who, he was a vice president, and he would ignore his boss's 3 a.m. emails until one day his boss sent a 3 a.m. email, and by everyone had been trained, his fellow colleagues had been trained to respond to these emails because they had their phones set up so they could make a sound when email came in. And if you heard 3 or 4 ding, ding, dings, it meant that something was happening. You needed to get on the phone and find out what was happening. By the time he responded to the email at 7 a.m. to the thread, they had already cut his budget by 50%, something like that, because they had already decided, okay, great, so we'll cut your budget by, as he discovers at 7 a.m. that he's been on the wrong side of the stick. And
Yeah,
because he wasn't involved, therefore, and he eventually left the company because he found the practices so abhorrent, but they were never, of course, they were never intentionally put in place. They were also never seen as a problem. So
right,
obviously they weren't prohibited.
right.
But there are companies in the world where they prohibit email between like sleeping hours, right? Between like 10 and 6 or something
Yeah, I
like that.
know in Germany, Volkswagen, I think, did that, but and another company for sure. But as I understand it, if I remember correctly, it's only for the blue collar guys. It is not for the white collar.
Oh,
And I have a hunch. This is just me estimating here or guessing, but one reason why we see companies unwilling to consider this sort of overwhelm and the chaos they create for white collar workers, that so many white collar workers are salaried, not hourly.
right,
So, Francis, I don't really care if you're working at 1 in the morning because it's not costing me. Your paycheck is the same.
right.
Hourly guys, they're going to charge me time and a half or double time because
Right.
it's overtime if I
So
have
there's a
to work
cost.
10 or 11 or
There's
12.
a monetary cost to sending a 1 a.m. email to a time and a half worker.
Exactly right. And so why should I really care? Why should I even take the time to think about the chaos I'm creating and the extra work and the overwhelm and the fact that now you have to work on Saturdays or Sundays? Doesn't bother me. My
Right.
my overhead in terms of employee salary is not going up, so I don't care. And
Right.
therefore,
So
it's really incumbent upon us, the workers, to say we need to think. If you're in a position where you supervise, you're either key to a group or you supervise a group, it's incumbent upon us to think about them. If we are not in that position, to at least start to bring up that conversation with the group or with the group leader saying, hey, let's talk about how we are managing these tasks and how we manage communication because it's just not working.
right. And for the person who is a time blocker or a serious task manager, which is the bulk of our summit here is the
Yeah.
attendees at our event, is as you're listening, guys, I'd like for you to imagine that you've joined a new company and you didn't really do a whole lot of due diligence. So your first day on the job is really your first day in the office. And as you're in the office, you realize that the scurry level is exceedingly high. And people are scurrying because there are, just as Dan described, there are messages flying back and forth, multiple platforms, multiple times of day, multiple everything. It's out of control, and there's no conversation around even, does this make sense? And as someone who wants the time block, you may come to learn that there is no time blocking in this environment. I promised myself that if I ever take a job again, I would negotiate nap time for myself in the afternoon. So that's a time block, time to nap. And if the company doesn't want it, I would tell them, okay, well, my doctor requires it. And if they say, well, tough, you still can't do it, I would say, oh, this is not because it would tell me something about the culture of the company. But that's just a small example. We can tell if we're time blockers and we're serious about our productivity, whether an organization is set up to allow us to do our best work. So email is one sure indicator that an organization might be actually set up for you never to do your best work other than very early in the morning, late at night, on holidays and on weekends.
I there's a couple of hospitals in the U.S. that are now doing this. Cleveland Clinic, I think, might have been the pioneer. But one thing they've done to reduce communication overwhelm and give people more time, the ability to task block or time block, they have a series of what they call tiered huddles. So I don't remember exactly how many levels they have, but let's just say at 8 o'clock, the frontline staff meet. with their supervisor. And then at 8:30, the supervisors meet with the, with the manager. And then at 9 o'clock, the managers meet with the director. And then at 9:30, the directors meet with the VP. And then at 10 o'clock, the VPs meet with the C-suite. And so any issue during that half hour or 20 minutes or whatever the length of time is, whatever problems have come up or questions or issues are addressed, and they're solved right there and then. If they can't be solved, they get escalated to the next tier. And so now we go into the 8:30 meeting, and the supervisors are saying, "Hey, listen, I got a problem with the frontline caregivers. We don't know what to do." And if they don't know, then it goes up to the manager level. By noon at Cleveland Clinic, the CEO has heard
Every
all of the
urgent issue.
problems that could not be handled at a lower level.
Right.
And think about it. We've got these meetings. All of a sudden, I don't need to send emails out, right? Because the thing really important that needs to be fixed, I've already brought it up, and it's going to go, if it has to go all the way up to the CEO, by noon, it's going to be heard. Mm-hmm. This is what back to where we start our conversation, this is what I mean by draining the pond or the swamp. Mm-hmm. Now we've just gotten rid of all the necessity of a whole bunch of bullshit emails going back and forth, trying to find someone. They're meeting, they're not here, they're not there. We've saved ourselves a whole bunch of effort by creating a clear structure for escalating these issues.
So messages now follow a process.
Yes.
A daily, or for that day anyway, a daily process of escalation. So I don't need to, it doesn't need to enter the general email chatter. It doesn't need to go into Slack, where we'll beat it to death and bat it back and forth, where it'll consume hours and hours and hours of people's time.
Exactly.
That won't happen because we have figured out a way to manage urgent and critical messages so that problems get solved as quickly as possible.
Right. Now, someone watching this is going to think, well, that sounds really good, but what if there's something that's truly urgent that needs to be resolved right now? And this is going back again to my comment about Marshall McLuhan and the medium is the message. That's why doctors have pagers. In fact, my wife is a physician, and I will not let her get rid of her pager. And she thinks it's kind of a hassle to carry a cell phone and a pager. But when she gets a page, that means everything stops. In fact, she doesn't even take a subway when we're in New York. She doesn't even take a subway because she can't get her pages in the subway. When she's on call, she stays above ground because she needs to be able to respond within a minute or 2 minutes. And there are plenty of doctors at our hospital that have given that up. They're now having their pages route into their cell phones. And they say, well, I don't want to carry two devices. And I certainly understand that that's kind of a pain in the butt, who wants to carry it. But now that means that their pages, they can't see, the medium is the message, right? They can't see whether it's an urgent page about a patient, or it's a text from their husband saying, hey, listen, could you pick up some pasta and a quart of milk at the store? Or from a friend saying, hey, you want to get together this Saturday to go for dinner and a movie? And so now they have to look at every single message coming into their cell phones, every single text message, and they've lost the ability to discriminate. And so here at Cleveland Clinic, they've got these tiered huddles, the tiered meetings for anything that's really important, but doesn't need to be solved this second. And they still have their pagers to handle those things. And it's cut down on the chatter, the scurrying, that chaos of messages and Slack and whatnot that just kill everyone.
Right, the undeliverables and the bounces and the
exactly.
You know, it strikes me that what you're getting to the heart of here is that the intelligent choices around the system, modern choices. Let's say modern, because we're talking about choices that would actually track with the very latest technology. Like you put in Slack, and then there's a spin-off behavior that comes from putting in the app and making everyone use it. But we ignore that whole thing, right? But we're talking about catching up with the technologies that we are making people use.
Yeah.
And catching up in this intelligent way that allows you to put policies. If you could even be proactive, it would be a miracle. But at this point, it's all reactive. It's all 3 years after the fact. was that really a good idea to bring that Slack in the way that we did? Probably wasn't. No, in retrospect, it actually made things worse. But if companies could be smart enough about their employees' productivity, they could anticipate that a technology that influences messaging, for example, would have this mal effect. And then they put in training before and
Yeah.
policies that, for example, your wife, when a new doctor joins, they would say, okay, if you want to use your cell phone, here's the app that is a pager app that overrides everything else on your cell phone, whether it's the battery's dead, it still goes off. It rings with an alarm that doesn't stop until you turn it off. It'll work in the subway, it'll work on the moon. It's specifically engineered to meet your rigorous needs around paging. So, but that's not, it's all instead left to the discretion of the user, which means that you, the company, your system wrecks my productivity and I don't have much of a say in it. I'm kind of just scrambling to keep up because I suspect that most people who are into productivity, task management, and time blocking join companies in which a culture is already existing, and you spend the first probably 6 months just trying to adapt to the craziness that you know. And by the time you realize that there's something really, really wrong here, you're thinking of leaving.
You know, it seems like a heavy lift, but it's possible to make changes even after the fact.
So,
Leslie Perlow, who is at Harvard Business School, wrote a book called, you may be aware of it, Sleeping with Your Smartphone. And it was based on a project she did, research, and then a project she did with Boston Consulting Group. So if you're BCG, you're like McKinsey, you charge $500,000 or $1 million or more for your consulting prowess. And their dominant philosophy was, if we're charging that much, we better be on call all the time so that whenever the customer or the client wants to talk to us, we're available. And it forced people to sleep with their smartphones. And it was stressful and it was overwhelming, and no one got to see their wives or husbands or kids or go for a run or do anything like this. And she found that they were burning out. And so BCG, in conjunction with her, came up with this notion. And this is, by the way, this is not like a Copernican insight. You know, the Earth revolves around the sun, not the other way around. They came up with this notion of let's have predictable time off. Mm-hmm. So every consulting project is not just an individual, it's a team of consultants. So let's just say you got 5 or 6 people on a team. Well, Francis, you're off on Monday nights, and I'm off on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and Suzanne is off on Wednesdays, and someone else is off on Thursdays. Now, I know I'm not going to bother you, and the client knows that you're not available on Mondays. That's okay, because I'm available and the other people are available. And what they found was that work-life balance went up, burnout went down, satisfaction went up, and not just employee satisfaction, but customer satisfaction went up, because the people who are working weren't fried all the time. And so it's easy for me to respond to a client when I know that they can't talk to you because tonight's my night, I'm on call. Okay, right. I'm ready for it. And tomorrow I'm not going to be on call, or whatever it happens to be. And so it turns out that they, by being explicit and overt about how they want to manage their communications, right, changed everything. And they changed the culture at the organization. First, it was in just the Boston office, and eventually it spread to all the offices around the globe.
Right.
So it can be done. It's not always easy, but it can be done. And that, of course, allowed, and then, of course, you can extend that to a whole idea of time blocking during the course of the day.
Right, right. The preservation of your best, most productive time blocked time is therefore a function of, so far, email messaging, your predictable time off. I had the thought it's also a function of the layout of your office, because if you're gonna be in an open office environment, as you walk in that first day and you didn't do your due diligence, and you see everyone crowded around one big desk, and everyone trying to keep a corner, and their shoulders are rubbing together, and your jaw drops, and you realize, I'm not, the last I've time blocked my last hour, so I'll never have that luxury again.
It did not even occur to me, but you're absolutely right. A fully open office is the physical manifestation of what we're talking about, right? Your individual productivity is not going to work if the physical organization is forcing you to sit at one giant table in one giant room. Good luck time blocking. You can't do it. So it's exactly the same thing. It didn't even occur to me, but it's the physical analog of what I'm talking about with information movement. It's physical space.
Right, but the principle that you're advocating is that there's an umbrella system, and you're here. You're inside this environment that doesn't. I don't mean to give it intent, but it doesn't really care about your productivity. The prevailing ethos is it does what it does, and you do what you do.
Yes.
And even though what it's doing is ruining your productivity, we'll all kind of just complain about it, and we'll pretend that it's not happening, and
Right.
we'll just have you struggle along in your open office environment, trying to manage multiple messages from multiple people, trying to be productive on your own, without the cooperation of others, having email bouncing back and forth, without anyone saying or asking the question, how can we make that each of the individuals more productive by making some smart choices? I've not met an executive in a company who's asked that question. I'm not even sure it's anyone's job. What do you think?
I think you're right. I think most leaders, most executives say, I've hired this great guy, Francis Wade, who's smart, motivated, capable, uh, goal oriented. I'm going to make sure he has the tools to do his job, make sure that he has a desk and a computer and email, and I'm going to let him go. And I'll give him objectives to reach for, but I'm not really paying attention to your environment because fish don't pay attention to the water they're in. It's just all around. And the executives are working in the same kind of environment with the same sort of dysfunction and the same sort of counterproductive aspects and characteristics. So they're absolutely not thinking about it. It's just, this is the world. And it's only when you go into a different kind of environment that you can see it and say, hey,
Yeah,
look
right,
at this place. They don't have meetings on Fridays. This
right.
place, 10 o'clock to noon every day, free from any internal meetings. This place doesn't use Slack, and they only use Slack. They only use Slack for urgent things, and they don't use or text messages. They only use cell phones for urgent things. They don't ever send urgent stuff through emails. It's only through seeing something else where you kind of go, oh, it actually could be different.
Well, do you think that your message that the systematic productivity needs to be tackled in conjunction with individual productivity may get some legs when folks go back into the office after working from home? Are you optimistic that way?
That's a really good question.
Say yes, say yes, say yes. We're hoping.
It's an interesting question. I think it will certainly, I think people are going to see their office with fresh eyes, right? I think
Do you think?
what happens with that, whether they just fall into old habits or not, who knows? But you're right. I think people are going to say, hey, over the last year and a half or whatever, I've actually been able to pick my kid up from school. I've actually been able to make lunch for my kid, and that was terrific. I've actually been able to go for a walk for a half hour with my wife. And I think they're going to go back to the office and say, wait a minute, why can't I see my wife? Why can't I have a little bit of time to do this? Why can't I just turn off Zoom and be left alone for 45 minutes to do my own work, to block out my time? So it would be great. And I think that people we be confronted with fresh, or be able to see their old environment with fresh eyes. Whether they take that opportunity to rethink the way they work is another question.
I hope so, because what the thrust of your message is so important that when someone has to return to the office, they're caught in traffic between 6 and 7:30, so they have a commute from hell, right? And on that first day as they're fighting with traffic on some I-95 or 275 or whatever, and they're thinking to themselves, I'm in the car between 6 and 7:30. I'm going to get there tired and distracted and annoyed. And when I work from home between 6 and 7:30, no one is really moving. And I've done miraculous things between 6 and 7:30. Every single day I was at home, I was sheltering in place.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, that 1.5 hours that I had in the morning is now erased. And now all I'm doing is wasting my life caught in traffic for now. So I
Yeah.
wonder if that epiphany will like, hang on a minute, what am I doing here? Why are we insisting? I even read recently that some people are predicting that the office will become a place to socialize and you will do your best work at home.
That's fascinating.
Crazy, huh? What do you think of that?
You know, it's interesting because you think about it, we used to have to go to the office because we didn't have the ability to do work with, at home, because the computers and the files were all at work. Now, of course, they're right here in our phones, not to mention laptops and whatnot. So you obviously it's easy to do. People talk about where they're missing at work is both the human connection and also the serendipity of brainstorming and all of that stuff. To your point, I think it's interesting. I could see people going into work just to have that connection, and then they're going to say, I'm out of here. I have to go home. I've got 3 hours of work I need to take care of, and do
Yeah.
their blocking.
I don't have time to stay at work and
Yeah.
hope for the serendipity to like just magically happen. I really actually have a hard deadline this time around. So sorry guys. Can't shoot the breeze at the water cooler. Wish I could, but
I
wonder.
didn't even think of that. It's a fascinating idea.
But if it gives your message some legs, if there is a reckoning coming and your message does get taken up, is your book actually around this particular message, or is this message come after your book?
It's actually after my latest book is on problem solving and how to avoid jumping to conclusions. But this has been something, this idea of the system level improvements has been on my mind for a while, because I've been struggling, as I'm sure you have, with when we look at this community of people who really are thoughtful and self-aware, and objective about getting work done and being productive and being efficient, and they're not succeeding.
Yeah.
You could look at any internet, any sort of chat room, any sort of Reddit board, whatever, and the complaints people have today are exactly the same as the ones they had 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And yet when we talk about time blocking and task management, it's not like we're putting a rover on Mars. The concepts are pretty simple, and yet they're still struggling with it. And it's not because they're not smart, and it's not because they're not hardworking. It's not because they're not diligent.
Right.
It's because why are we failing? And I think it's because it's not we that are failing, we individually, it's we collectively. It's the organization, it's the system that's failing us.
But this is the message of your next book.
Yeah.
And I'm urging you along in a way, because if there is this mass migration of workers back to the office, and there is a mass discovery that the office is the worst place to try and get anything done, they're going to be looking for, why did I go from being productive at home to being unproductive at the office? And why is it that no one else sees what I see? Oh, look, here's Dan Markovitz's book. The system is ruining your productivity, and here's why.
Right.
Maybe if you start writing soon, the timing might be right, and when people go back, they'll be looking for solutions, and next thing you know, you have the answer. If I could encourage you at all, I suspect we're not alone, you and I, in sort of these experiences at all. These are widespread, and if you're not someone who's a vice president or a CEO of a company, and even if you are, I'm the head of my company, but I'm subject to every client's whim and fancy in terms of what they want to do and the way they want to do it. But if we don't have an organizing principle or a way to become aware, then even before getting into action, because really what we're talking about mostly here is awareness. that
Yeah.
with proper awareness, you can at least think about taking actions.
Yes, it's, you mentioned something about how you work independently. Well, you and your wife, of course. And you're right, you are subject to the whims of your clients. But I think that you can also help nudge them in a direction. And what I mean by that is people tend to respond within the medium they get. If I
Right,
send you a message in Slack, probably you're not going to call me back
right,
or send me a text message. If I send you an
right,
email, you're probably going to hit reply to the email.
right,
Similarly, if I call you, you're probably going to call me back. It's
right,
not guaranteed by any means, but we can subtly nudge if we work independently or deal with a lot of outside partners, colleagues, we can nudge them. And if you think, boy, what I'd like to do is handle this via phone calls. Well, let's start making phone calls. You contacted me today via Zoom.
right,
We set this up via Zoom. I didn't say I didn't like doing Zoom. I just thought, well, okay, you wanted Zoom, and so I went with the flow. Um, and so and so because that's because you initiated it, and so it
right,
started that way. And as a result, I think that for the people who are independent, we can nudge our external partners. If you're not independent, if you work in an organization, probably 80% of your, at least, well, let's say at least 50%, probably closer to 80% of your communication is internal. So you don't have to work. So if you can't control 20 or 30% of your clients and outside folks, fine, don't worry about it. Let's take control over the 70 or 80% and make that conducive to productive work, something that's not so maddening and soul destroying as it is right now.
right, right. I'd love for you to come back to next year's summit. So here's my plan for you. So this year is awareness. Your book, people go back into the office. People like me need to bring this level of awareness to our clients. Send your book to our clients and say, hey, take a look, nudge, nudge, nudge. And we come back next year being fully aware of how the systems around us ruin our productivity in
Yeah.
whether you're in a small business company or a big company. And then you can just throw some solutions for us for next year because you figured it all out by then and we'll be fertile ground. Is that a
Perfect.
deal? Kind of.
Great. All I have to do is come up with the solutions. So at least you're giving me at least 12 months to do that.
You got a year.
Kind of you. Thank you.
But Dan, you're onto some very, very, very important. And the reason I wanted to invite you is because it's not the typical task management and time blocking problem that
Yeah.
we are trying to solve in the summit, but it is one that every single person who attends this summit must face. And there are no nice, easy answers, and the awareness just isn't there at the moment. How can people hear more about your work and where can they find you on the internet? Where can they communicate with you if they want to, bring you in to come and help you bring some
Right.
awareness to people that they work with?
So on Twitter, I tweet under @Dan Markovitz, one word, @Dan Markovitz. My website is Markovitz Consulting. And I'm also on LinkedIn as well. And if you look for Dan Markovitz, it turns out there is a Daniel Markovitz whose last name is spelled with an S at the end, not a Z. And he is a political scientist.
Found him,
So
yeah.
start seeing these things about political science, you got the wrong guy. You're looking for the Markovitz with a Z. But anyway, Markovitz Consulting or Twitter @Dan Markovitz, and the Google, of course, can find me. So if anyone does want to follow up on this, be delighted to engage in a conversation.
Great. Is there any resource you want to nudge them towards in particular at this point?
Well, I did write a book. My first book actually was called A Factory of One, which is about the concept of applying lean manufacturing principles to knowledge work. And I still think that stands to the test of time. And there's a lot of insights and approaches that I think you may have seen before or have some familiarity with. But I think it provides a different perspective and may be a useful tool for people to think about how they can manage their own personal productivity a little bit better.
Great. Dan, the work you're doing is so important. It's like shining a light on this dark spot in every company that I've ever worked with that no one talks about, that everyone suffers from, and everyone complains about. Even the chairman of the board is
Yes.
complaining about these things, and he or she is also saying, I don't know what to do about these things, and I don't know where to start, and can't you people get your act together? And I think it's so important where you're headed. And I as an engineer, a fellow engineer, and somebody who was brought up on lean principles, this idea of the system having its own life is the one that I think that I want everyone to have, so that they can look around them and see the system that is ruining their productivity and be able to do something about it. So thanks for joining us.
The pleasure is mine, Francis. I look forward to the conference. And again, it's been a real pleasure to be with you today.
Thanks very much. And to Summiters, thanks for tuning in. There's lots more coming in the live presentations and the pre-recordings. Make sure you get as much as you can while we are in session for the next either 1, 2, or 3 days, depending on when this actually airs. Take care. This is Francis signing out, and see you later. Bye-bye.